Welcome to Canada's Court. I'm Philip Drost, and it's finally time for March Madness. Possibly my favorite time as a basketball fan. You get all the upsets, but you get the heartbreaks, you get the excitement, and you get some players, doing things you never even thought were possible. All of that great stuff. And of course, there are plenty of Canadians to watch throughout the men's and the women's tournament. Oren Weisfeld is an expert on all things Canadian basketball. He's even writing a book about it. So he knows his stuff. He's coming back on the podcast to talk some college hoops. Oren, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
For sure. Thanks for having me.
So I understand you obviously keep up a ton with Canadian basketball, but you're not watching too much NCAA throughout the year. That's a pretty big commitment to commit to all those games.
Yeah. I don't watch a ton of college basketball. I try to watch the Canadians when I can. But college basketball, I watch so much NBA, first of all. And second of all, I just find it not nearly as entertaining, especially on the men's side. People have made this point before, but the game has started to turn more and more into like a style of NBA basketball, but just not as good athletes or players as the NBA. So I don't love that. Not that I loved it before either, when it was really systematic and slower and all that stuff. So I just find the game is a little too slow for me. There's too many whistles. Not a huge college basketball fan, but I'm always trying to track the Canadians though.
Yeah, and you know them well from watching the national team and all that stuff. So definitely the right person to talk to here. I'm probably in a similar boat to you. I don't watch a ton of NCAA basketball, so if people are looking for the in-depth analysis on what the big upsets are, this probably isn't the place. But if you want to know who the Canadians are, who you should be watching, this is a perfect spot. And what's kind of cool this year is actually locally here in Toronto, we've gotten to see some of the big names come right into the city who are going to be playing in March Madness. I think probably the biggest name on most people's radars is Zach Edey of Purdue. Purdue obviously being the number one seed in their kind of area, the fourth overall, I believe. What should people know about Zach Edey? He's a big guy.
Big guy. Yeah, so I saw him play in Toronto earlier. I guess it was in December or January against Alabama. He had a huge game. And the interesting, I guess people who listen probably know a little bit about Zach Edey. He's 6'4". He's a monster. He's been dominating college. He's probably about to win his second back-to-back National Player of the Year over there at Purdue. I think the interesting thing is that he tested the NBA waters last year after a historic season at Purdue, and there wasn't interest. Like he might have got picked late in the second round, but he was basically, obviously told, or else he wouldn't have gone back to college, that it wasn't a guaranteed thing. There was still questions about his foot speed, questions about, foot speed on defense is definitely the biggest thing. And I think how effective of an offensive player he could be in a limited role, given those defensive limitations, there was also a question. So he goes back to college. He plays for the senior men's national team at the World Cup, which I think, if anything, hurt his stock because he wasn't good. He couldn't get on the floor. And when he did, people will remember, like, Jordy Fernandez put him in to get a defensive rebound on the Mikal Bridges 4-point play. Zach Edey messed up that play. Bridges gets his own rebound and hits a three. So he wasn't good in the tournament. And then fortunately he goes back to Purdue, and now his draft stock is way higher than it's ever been. I've seen people have him in the top 10. It seems very clear he'll be a first round pick unless something falls out. So yeah, he's just basically gone and answered all the questions that he could in his final season at Purdue. And NBA teams are clearly impressed by what they've seen, because all the talk is that he's going to probably get picked in the lottery, if not just outside of it in the first round. And I think it was more of the same of the stuff he did last season, just a little bit more refined, and the defense, his ability to move, probably a little bit better. But yeah, I don't think he did much this year that was wildly different from last year. Just a little bit more efficient. a little bit better of a passer for sure, and the foot speed on defense a little bit better. And I think just proving it over a 2-year span rather than a 1-year span helped NBA teams say, like, okay, if he's having this kind of production at college, maybe we shouldn't be looking past this anymore.
And the other thing with that is he is a winner, right? This is the second time they've come in as a number one seed. Now, last year they lost in the first round, and unfortunately, I had maybe picked Purdue to go all the way in my bracket pool. A few people know this, but I have a bit of a weakness when it comes to March Madness in for whatever reason. I think it goes back to childhood. I'm sure a therapist could explain it more deeply, but I always pick like a team with a really good big man, and so the fact that Purdue has a great big man and has a Canadian big man, I got no chance. I kind of just have to pick them to go all the way. I think it dates back to when I picked Greg Oden, which also looking back at it, maybe not a historic pick, but they've got a chance to win it all, and so if you're looking for a Canadian to root for, that's a guy who you could see playing in the Final Four. You could see playing for a national championship. Not the only Canadian to be mentioned out there. We've also got Ryan Nembhard on Gonzaga. Most people will be like, that name sounds kind of familiar. He's the younger brother of Andrew Nembhard, who's now on the Indiana Pacers. Ryan plays for the 5 seed Gonzaga, which is playing McNeese. What should people know about Ryan Nembhard?
Yeah, so like his brother, he played his first 2 years not at Gonzaga. Ryan was at Creighton. And it was kind of a controversial decision for him to transfer because Creighton was really good last year and he was the lead guard there and everything. But I think the family's familiarity with Gonzaga, bigger program, led him to go there after their point guard left. And he's had a really, really good season. Similar game to his brother, but he's a bit smaller. So that's the biggest knock on him. He's 6 foot and he's not extremely bulky. But yeah, like this guy's a winner. Talk about winning. I mean, everywhere he goes, his teams just win. Good defender at the point of attack. Pretty efficient year. Shot 45% from the field this year, and his coaches just can't seem to take him off the floor. He also had 6.7 assists per game, which is one of the top in college basketball this year. So he went to Gonzaga and he's had a really, really good year. I mean, he's another guy, he's probably going to do a 4th year before he tests NBA waters, just like his brother did. But Gonzaga's a team to watch. Like they had a good season. They're a 5th seed. They kind of have all the components they need. Purdue is a Zach Edey offense, and I think we saw last year how maybe in a 1-game setting, if guys aren't hitting their shots and he's getting double teamed, that can be kind of exploited. But yeah, Gonzaga definitely has a few more weapons, and Ryan Nembhard is one of them, but he's really the facilitator. He's the guy that's going to get everyone organized. Again, he plays like his brother, and he's a good player, and again, it's going to be, he'll probably fall in a similar position where his brother, where he goes later than he should have, and proves that he's a winner at the next level too.
I feel like Gonzaga, Canadian fans always get to cheer for Gonzaga. They've always got a few Canadians on the team. They like to run it through there. We appreciate that.
For sure. I mean, it started like Robert Sacra, I think, and Kelly Olynyk after that. So the pipeline has been a long time. I guess it's pretty close to BC there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they've been scouting, especially in BC, for a long time, and they have reaped rewards. Kelly Olynyk was like one of the best. Was I think the player of the conference in his final year there. Andrew Nembhard. They've had really good Canadians.
Another player we can talk about with another connection to a player in the NBA now is Emanuel Miller. What should people know about Emanuel Miller?
Yeah, so definitely a guy to watch. Leonard Miller's brother, who's now with the Minnesota Timberwolves, just finishing his 5th season at TCU. I talked to Leonard when they were also in Toronto as part of that tournament that Alabama played Purdue. TCU also played someone. TCU lost, but he told me that he tested the NBA waters last year, and he shot 40% from three, but teams basically said to him, like, we want to see you do it again. We don't trust the jump shot yet. He's an amazing defender. Like, you watched him at Global Jam as well a couple of years ago. Like, he was the best defender on that team. He's an incredible defender. Honestly, kind of like body-wise, athleticism-wise, similar to his brother. So they're built for the NBA right as they walk into it, but more of a robotic offensive player and wasn't known as a shooter. But so that happened, and he's followed it up again, shooting 38% from three. So now it's 2 years in a row where he shot 40% pretty much from three, which I think is really encouraging for his draft stock. Or he might not be a drafted guy, but he'll probably go the summer league, G League undrafted route. But I think he has a chance to make it to the NBA just given those defensive tools, and given that now he has 2 years of improved shooting from three, improved shooting from the free throw line. Huge part of that TCU team. Again, they can't take him off the floor because of his defense. And yeah, a guy to root for sure, because he kind of came up in his brother's shadow a little bit, but he's been grinding in the NCAA for 5 years now, every year just getting a little bit better. And I think after this, yeah, he'll test the NBA waters. And I really think I've said this about players before. I thought Marcus Carr was an NBA player, so maybe not. But I think Emanuel Miller might be able to crack a roster.
Lots of good Canadians on top teams this year, which is exciting. I feel like we don't have maybe the sheer volume on top teams, but we've mentioned some of the big ones. Another player who's on a very strong team is Aiden Holloway, who's on Auburn. Auburn's the 4th seed. They're going to be playing just ahead here. They're playing Yale. What should people know about Aiden Holloway?
Yeah, like admittedly, I haven't watched a ton of Auburn this year, but Lee Ben Osmond in the Star wrote about how Aiden Holloway just kind of learned that he had Canadian roots only like a year ago, and then he started playing on the national team, I think, last summer. So it's kind of a cool story there. Known as a really good shooter. Started the year at Auburn not playing as much, but as the year's gone on, he's played a little more and a little more, and he's had a lot the last few weeks. He's played pretty well, and he's gone on the floor more. So he's a freshman. Can't expect a ton of that, especially in the tournament. Don't expect him to play a ton, but he's a guy that Canadian fans should keep their eye on just because he's so young. He just kind of popped onto the scene, and he's really an elite shooter. At least that's what he was known for coming into college.
We were kind of talking about this before we started recording, but not quite the same amount of Canadian stars and Canadian potential. I mean, if you look at draft boards now, you'll see Zach Edey up there, but not a lot of really like potential high draft picks coming out of Canada. Where do you think that kind of comes from? Is this just a bit of a lull, or is there something more to this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's a lot of factors. One is that the same thing that's happening in the United States is happening with Canadians, is that not all the best players are going to the NCAA. Like, we have 2 Canadians right now playing overtime elite, and they're really good, but they chose not to go to the NCAA, right? They chose to get paid, and they'll try to go to the NBA through there. So some of them are doing that. Some of them are just playing pro overseas. More players are probably even playing in youth sports. Like, we had Queens go to the final, and their point guard Cole, forget his name, forget his last name right now, but I'll look it up. But him and his brother basically went to Queens for all 5 years. They're Kingston natives, and they built that program from the ground up and got them to the national finals in their first year, won OUA on a buzzer beater. Guys like him, he could have been an NCAA player for sure. But I would say a little bit more they're staying in youth sports as the talent level of that league just improves. COVID, I think, is definitely a factor where a lot of people's growth just got stunted compared to Americans not playing games. Canada had way stricter rules, so that happened. And the other thing, probably the biggest thing, is what's happened with the new transfer rules is teams are recruiting upperclassmen. They're recruiting juniors and sophomores and seniors because they know they can play and they can go without redshirting a year now. Whereas high school kids are having tougher and tougher times getting NCAA scholarships. So even though in Canada now there is more of a like eyesight on them, there's more coaches in the gym. They're getting seen more than they ever did coming out of Canada. There's just fewer and fewer scholarships to give out because teams are not recruiting as many freshmen anymore. So I would say all of those factors has led to this being one of the worst classes of Canadians in NCAA right now. But there's a lot of talent coming through the pipeline in high school, and there's a lot of talent, like I said, in overtime and places like that.
You're obviously, you're glued to the NBA as we've said, and the Toronto Raptors, who you cover, are going to be potentially making a couple draft picks this year. So outside of the Canadians, is there any NCAA players that you're kind of like, oh, I might want to tune in to watch them, see how they are, and see if that's maybe a player the Raptors might end up taking?
Yeah, I'm a bad person to answer that question.
All good, all
I
good.
refer to the draft experts for those kind of questions. So
That's fair. That's
yeah,
fair.
I can't say. I'm just hoping they keep their pick at this point, and then I'll start to look at those top
Mm-hmm.
echelon guys. But I don't want to get my hopes up. Look, favorite a guy, and then the Raptors have to give the 7th pick to the Spurs. So I'm still afraid of that happening, and that's part of the reason I haven't dove into the draft much.
I think you're not the only person fearing that one. I mean, the Raptors' recent losing streak might maybe give them some improved odds, but
Yeah.
yeah, there's a good chance that this whole tough season might not be for nothing, but it might be a little bit even more disappointing come draft lottery time.
Yeah.
There's also, of course, the women's side of the tournament, and another big name we mentioned Canadians who got to play in Toronto recently, Leah Edwards and UConn. They won quite handily when they came to visit Toronto. Leah Edwards definitely going to be a player for Canadians to watch.
Yeah, fortunately, it seems like she's going to play because she did break her nose pretty badly and she was forced out of the final of the, or I think it was a semifinal of the tournament. But I just read that she should be back in time for March Madness, which is really welcome news given this is almost for sure her last year as a Husky. She's been projected definitely in the first round of the WNBA draft. I've seen her go as high as 4 or 5. And I mean, you watch the Huskies play, and it's no wonder why. Like, she's their everything in their front court. They play through her a ton as a playmaker, even. She's the top rebounder, scorer with Paige Buchers. Like, Becker's like, she's just a completely well-rounded athlete at this point. And same thing if you watch her play for Canada, even at the senior level, she's been one of their top players. Like, Aaliyah is a really impressive player. I think a big reason the Canadian team struggled this summer and barely made the Olympics was because Aaliyah wasn't there. So yeah, they're hoping to have her this summer for the Olympics for sure. I think she will be there. I talked to her when she came to Toronto, and it's a little complicated with the WNBA, but they're going to take a break in their season for the Olympics. So I expect her to be with Team Canada then. And yeah, it's just she does everything at a really elite level. UConn is definitely has a chance to win it all. They're a very fun team to watch. So yeah, I don't know what else can be said about Aaliyah. I feel like everyone knows her game by now.
And one of the really kind of cool things about her is like you said, some of the other players we've mentioned, their role on Team Canada, whatever it is going forward, isn't probably going to be huge. Like
Mhm.
Zach Edey, he'll probably play some minutes and get some more time with the national team, but doesn't look to be, at least not immediately, a main piece for that rotation. Whereas, like you said, with Leah Edwards, that's someone who could be a star for Canada at the upcoming Olympics if she's there. Um, she could be a really big factor. So, really fun player for Canadians to watch. If you haven't watched her yet, this is your chance to get your kind of your primer ahead of the summer, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. Like Victor LaPena loves her, and I
Mm-hmm.
think she's a really mature player for her age, and that's probably why. And like you said, like she will very likely start this summer. So yeah, I mean the Canadians are in a weird phase right now where they're kind of in between a couple age groups, and I think we saw that at the qualifier. But more than that, they didn't have all their best NCAA talent because it was in the middle of the season. Ivonie Emmi was the only one who went. I think when we see in the summer, hopefully they have all their talent. You'll see a way better team, and Aaliyah is probably the biggest missing piece.
You just mentioned another player who's going to be competing in the tournament here. Yvonne Ejim is for Gonzaga. She's been, like you said, an important part of Team Canada. What can people kind of expect from her game for the Zags?
Yeah, I mean, she's, you know, really a defensive minded player. She's a good rim protector. She plays the five sometimes. She plays the four, but she can switch on to anyone and move her feet really really well. But on offense, it's just been a wild improvement. Like I'm looking, she averaged 3 points in her first season, and she's up to 20 points this season, her fourth. So she was a raw offensive player. Like even when I saw her a couple years back at Global Jam 2022, like or 2021, no 2022, yeah, she was a raw player. She didn't play a ton, but she's just improved her touch so much and her jump shot so much, and now she can step out a little bit to the elbow and knock it down. And so in addition to being that rim runner, she's really improved her jump shot. And yeah, that's the biggest thing about her. But she's like, I would compare her to like Siakam coming out of college. She's like a hustle big. That's what she really got her name known for, is just like she's going to be on the boards. She's going to get steals, blocks. She's going to make those hustle plays all the time, and she's going to clean stuff up around the rim.
Going to be exciting to watch for sure. Is there any other players on the women's side that you think Canadians should at least be aware of and say, okay, if I'm tuned into this game, I should be looking out for her.
Yeah, I would say Marissa Russell at Louisville is her last season there, and she's been a Team Canada. She's played on the senior team already. She plays like a vet for sure. She's like a kind of 3-and-D type player, and she's definitely someone to keep an eye on in terms of going forward in the program. And then the other person is a Duke Emma Cobell. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. She's just in her second season. She's really young. She didn't play at all last season, really, when Shide Wilson was on the team, but she's starting to get minutes. She's a really good shooter, tall. Again, really young. She's someone who's been with the program, with the Canadian program, and is probably going to continue to develop there. So those are a couple names to watch out for. And then, you know, it's unfortunate because Cassandra Prosper to me is one of the best Canadians we have in the system right now, but she suffered a lower body injury very early in the season and just hasn't played. So I could look up the latest update on that, but I doubt she's gonna play in the tournament. Um, and she basically missed like her entire second sophomore season. So it's a real bummer for her because she was kind of set to have a really good season. She joined them halfway through last season as a freshman, so she didn't really get a full camp or anything. And this year was just like a big kind of roadblock, I guess, where she didn't get to do anything. But she'll be back next year, and we'll see. Again, sister of Omax Prosper. Um, and maybe she'll be ready in time for the Olympics. I think she's really good. She's that type of player. She's a long 3-and-D wing. But yeah, the injury has just cost her an entire season, unfortunately.
A lot of family connection here in the in the Canadian basketball scene. If you got a sibling, I guess that creates a competition. I guess maybe I can be blamed for my siblings never being able to develop into NBA players because I wasn't good enough competition for them on the driveway. So maybe they're going to be a little annoyed with me after listening to all this. One of the things you've wrote about recently is kind of some of the development that's gone on within the Canadian prep school circuit for women's basketball and how that's contributed to some of the players we see today, like Leah Edwards. Could you tell me a bit about that? What's that been about?
Yeah, for sure. So I just wrote this story for Sportsnet about Crestwood Prep, who's been the best high school basketball program in Canada for I would say about 8 years now. And what's happened is through Crestwood, through the OSBA, Canadian high school women's basketball has just taken it to another level where women no longer need to go to the States to get seen by NCAA schools, whereas the men still do. The best Canadian men still do. Women are just staying in largely Ontario, though there's a few exceptions. Playing in the OSBA, going to tournaments in the States, like Crestwood plays a bunch of American teams, gets seen there, and they have all the opportunities that Americans have. When you look at the future, the best ranked Canadians, almost all of them are in the NCAA or in the OSBA playing in Ontario, and the only ones who are at the top of the list who play in America are the Sword sisters, daughters of Sean Swords, who was a Canadian on the 2000 Olympic team. And I talked to Sean Swords for the book I'm writing, and I wanted to clarify why that was. And the only reason they're playing in the States is because he lives in New Jersey, New York area. He's an assistant with the Long Island Nets of the G League, and they actually played in the OSBA. They were doing great there, but the family wanted to move together, so that's the only reason. Everyone else who you look at on these lists is either at Crestwood or at one of these other Canadian schools. So that's been an impressive development on the girls' side, because obviously you want your best athletes to stay in the country as long as possible. It's a thing that we've struggled with on the men's side for many years, but on the girls' side, it's starting to change. And yeah, I mean, on the girls' side compared to the men's side, I would say there's a lot more top tier talent in the next couple of years. Like Leah Edwards, Cass Prosper, like those are really good players. But then coming into school next year, Silas Swords and Toby Fournier, they're also top ranked. Like both of them are I think in the top. Actually, I'm not exactly sure where ESPN has them, but yeah,
They're pretty good. They're pretty good.
they're known. Yeah, they're very highly recruited, very highly known players. And then after that, the year after that, I got McKeer, who I saw play in the OSBA finals a few weeks ago. Like, that's a name that everyone should be watching. She's at Crestwood right now. She has one more year there before she'll go see NCAA. She's working on getting her Canadian citizenship, but she has lived here most of her life, and she's training with Canada basketball, so she's hopeful. And she's like this 6-foot forward size player who can shoot the three like Steph Curry, but also like really defend because of her length. And in that game, like we just saw her knock down logo threes. It was incredible.
Wow.
So those are some names. After that, it'll be Savvy Swords, Sila's younger sister a year later, and then yeah, there's a lot of talent on the women's side coming up and coming up through Canada.
And so important, like you mentioned there, that they're playing close to home or playing in Canada. I know when I talked to Victor LaPena ahead of the Olympic qualifiers, he was kind of bemoaning the fact that so many of his players were he wasn't able to see them on a regular basis because whether they're in the NCAA or the WNBA, so he doesn't get to spend as much time watching them or working with them. So having players so close to home really makes a big difference when we think about it from a national team perspective. And I do got to say, you should be forgiven for not knowing the most about whatever Auburn's doing right now, because you're watching so many prep school basketball games. That's like you're above and beyond here, so you can be forgiven for not spending the most time watching the NCAA all season, I think.
Yeah, no, but that's a good point because, Victor, and I think there's a long history of Canada basketball being frustrated that they can't get these people in camps for as long as they want, and they can't get to develop them directly as much as they want because they're always in the States or they're playing overseas because we don't have a domestic women's league at the pro level either. But it's a good point because, like, I got McKeer, like, she's been training constantly with Team Canada. They've been helping her with injuries, their sports physiologists and stuff like that. So it helps so much. And the way Canada basketball is set up is really like you can kind of drop in when you want. If you want to work with a coach, you let them know and then they'll help you out. So it's huge to have people staying in Canada as long as possible.
We mentioned it off the top, and you mentioned it just here. Writing a book about Canada basketball. Where are you at in that process? That's got to be exciting.
Yeah, so it's called The Golden Generation. ECW Press, be out in fall of 2025. And it's about the growth of Canadian men's basketball, and it's told through kind of the lens of the Team Canada and the senior men's national team, and tracing the history from 2000, the last time they made the Olympics, till 2024 and whatever happens this summer in Paris. It's been really fun just to learn about the nation's history and some of these people who have played such a big hand in rejuvenating basketball at the grassroots level, and guys who came back like Steve Nash and Rowan Barrett and Michael Meeks, who played on that Olympic team and then came back and now run Canada basketball. But there's also so many people behind the scenes who volunteer coaches and stuff like that, who have played a huge factor in developing all of our favorite players like Shea, Gilgeous-Alexander, RJ Barrett, Kelly Olynyk. And yeah, I've started to talk to a ton of people, ton of the OGs, some of the NBA players, and I'm excited to share it with the world because I know that there are a lot of Canada basketball fans out there. There's more and more each summer I see. And I know people care about the team now. People care about the Team Canada, but I think people don't know where these players come from. So that's the goal of the book. It's kind of going to be a resource to help people understand where all these guys came from and the infrastructure and the context that they were brought up within.
Well, I've got a spot on my shelf for it for sure. Is there anybody you really enjoyed talking to so far? You've obviously chatted with a lot of people already.
Yeah, a lot of I've enjoyed most of the chats, honestly, because I've found that people really like talking about this. Like it's not like there's a huge media sphere around this, so a lot of these guys haven't had the opportunity to share a lot of these stories. I talked to Kelly Olynyk for almost an hour, and that was a great conversation. I have to plug that one because he's the captain of the team, and that's how you sell books.
Fair.
So that was a great conversation, honestly. But a lot of the old coaches have been really fun to talk to, like Ken Olynyk, who's Kelly's dad, Doc Ryan, who's an assistant coach, all the way from Jack Donahue's days all the way up to, I think, pretty much Leo Routen's days, and guys like Steve Konchalski, who coached the team right before Jay Triano took over and brought them to the Olympics. So a lot of the OG coaches, those have been good interviews too.
I remember reading Jay Triano's book a while back, and that was really cool from a bit of a time before when I was watching basketball with a lot of stuff I really didn't know. So this will be really interesting to kind of obviously you'll go into a lot of different stuff, but kind of more of an updated bring us to where we are now. I think will be really interesting for people to read.
Yeah, no, and I read that book too, and I think it's similar stories for sure. Like Jay's story is one of many that I'm going to tell, but it is a good example of we don't know this history. Like it really hasn't been told here in Canada. The resources on the media side just has never been there. So like there are a lot of these tournaments that they'll go and they'll qualify for the Olympics and not a single Canadian media member will have been there, and they'll call back home to do the interviews. So yeah, people don't know these stories, and that's, I think, why they're so eager to share them.
Awesome. You going to be watching any of the March Madness over the next couple of days, or are you going to be booked up with doing NBA stuff?
Well, the good thing is you can do a little bit of both
Yeah.
because those games run during the day. But yeah, I'll be dipping my toe in for sure. I'll be watching these Canadians as much as possible, and then I'll be watching the later rounds as they come. But yeah, the NBA is my true passion. So
That's fair. Well,
not
if
as
you
much
want to
as
do, if
Raptors
you
games, as hard as they are to watch, it's part of the grind for me.
Fair. Well, if you want to do a bracket, Canada's Court is doing a challenge. I got to quickly plug here. We are doing a March Madness bracket challenge. Super easy to join. You just got to click on the link wherever you're watching this and then type in the password Canada's Court. I made it as easy as possible for the password there for people. And then you just make your picks. And I'm trying to figure out a prize. So hopefully I'll come up with something good here. But Oren, I really appreciate you being willing to chat with me, and it's great to get an update on some of these awesome Canadian players. Should be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
My pleasure.
Always enjoy coming on the pod. So anytime.